We see that there is a difference, so a shift in paradigm, in fact, when we move from the traditional pharma to the digital pharma field. So here is shown in detail, and here we can explain why this digital, the shift in paradigm, in fact, has to reflect in the way we, in the IP that is developed in this field. So as we said before, when we are dealing with the traditional pharma, the product, the center of the business is usually a molecule or a composition. So what we expect and what is so far the way that the traditional pharma IP strategy has followed is to rely on patents that cover the product or the composition. And here we see an example, for instance, while we are dealing with diabetes. So it's an example of a potential claim on a composition for super fast-acting insulin. And well, we don't have to go into the details to delve into what is the content of this application. But now we move to the digital pharma and the system that we have been analyzing so far, that we have been discussing, so the smart tooth system. And we see that the smart tooth system is a very complex system which contains a very high number of elements which do not necessarily relate with insulin. It's really a combination of a lot of different technologies and platform and communications between devices and people outside and different systems. So here we cannot rely on this strategy, which is really focused on one element, but we have to visualize the whole ecosystem, in fact, that has been designed around this technology. So just to give a very example of what this new strategy will have to include is, for instance, the protection on the sensor, so the smart tooth. So where we are looking for a sensor which can detect the insulin in the blood and can send a sample and can send a signal to a controlling. But then, so you can have different parts of this system which may or may not be protected with IP yet. Maybe they are known, but they have to be grouped together. And then we have the second level, and the second level is the level that ties all the elements in the system together. So, for instance, we have to look for other type of IP where you basically protect the system, whereby you receive the signal from the insulin sensor and you transfer it to another unit that they will then control the correct release of the insulin in the body. So this is a whole different type of patent application, of concept, which you would never have found in the traditional pharma system. And then we go above, and we have to also figure out how to bring all this flow of information together. So we may have to design IP that relates to the data management. And so what do we do with all this flow of information that is coming from the sensor, that is going back to the insulin deployment unit, and also covers the interaction in information with the doctor, with the patient, with the gadgets, the apps that is also foreseen in this system. So we see that in changing the strategy, in changing the business model, we have to clearly adapt and go from one, I would say, discrete type of strategy to a exploded, strategy where you have a lot of different systems that have to be integrated together and work in collaboration. And of course, when you move from this type of system, I would say discrete, to this exploded system, this will also reflect on how you work when you have to, at the end, draft your patent applications. And the first step, the first impact will be on how do you search for prior art in this.
Yeah, so we learned about the difference between the traditional pharma and the digital pharma, and we assigned different patent types to this different technology areas. And what we want to find out now is where are the differences between the different types of patents regarding the different fields of this technology fields. And what we can find out is that when we look at patent type 2, this was the part at the traditional pharma, we find, let's start at the bottom, we have declining applications, so it seems it might be not so important anymore how the compound is built. The more important things are at the field of the area of digital pharma. So what we also can distinguish is that we have differences in the classes of IP which are assigned to the different types. We can also see that we have differences when we look at these different types in the applicants. And this is, I think, really interesting because we have for type 2 the compounds, the typical class of A61K, and the typical applicants and competitors like Eli Lilly, BMS, and Abbott Diabetes. So there's nothing surprising. When we look at patent type 3, this is the field of this sensor systems. We can see we have two main classes, A61B and G01N, and typical applicants which are in the field of electronics and medical systems. And there we see slightly increase in applications, but when we look at the numbers, they're still low, so about 15 to 25 applications, or here it's going from 20 to about, let's say almost 10 applications a year. And this is changing when we go further to patent type 1 and patent type 4, which is reflected here. Patent type 1 for the core system and patent type 4 for the management system. And here we'll get now a presentation.
Hi everyone. So Roland explained in detail the patent type 2 and patent type 3, which are patent type 2 more traditional pharma compound. 3 was around this glucose sensor, and we saw that from a freedom to operate perspective, we still know where we are acting, right? Similar to patent type 3, patent type 1, which is on the closed loop system, what you see here. Here also, it's a highly specialized technology, and you would probably see some expected players. So you would have players like maybe Abbott, BD, Philips, and the dominant IPC classes here would also be around, say for example, A61, which is surgery related or medical device related, and G01N, which is around the analyzing the information coming from the blood, insulin, to make that closed loop system work. So in a way, we would, for a patent type 1, we would still know where to look for the information. And the number of patent applications is also something which is manageable. This is what looks like from the trends. Now when you come to patent type 4, this is here things get murkier, or fuzzier, as you would say. As Isabella explained earlier, there's so much going on here. I mean, there's interaction with the sensors, there's data processing, there's computing, storing of information in all these platforms, interaction between these platforms, and transmission of the data. So many things going on in this patent type 4, and that's where it becomes a nightmare from a freedom to operate framework perspective, guys. So you have classes related from G06F, which is around, say for example, computing, to H04L, which is around transmission of data. So you see a whole lot of classes, which also means that there is a whole new set of players you will find here. I mean, you would be surprised to see that there's no competition that you know already. You may have companies that you consider are your partners, but somehow may become your competitors here when it comes to a freedom to operate perspective. So that's where you see the giants like the IBMs and the Microsofts and the Googles of the world, and the volume of information, again, I mean, as all of us know, will be drastically different from the single digit or say multi digits to thousands. I mean, you would not, I don't know. So from a freedom to operate perspective, yes, this would become a nightmare. There would be patents filed every day from companies that we don't even know. So that would be a struggle, and that's where we will discuss further how the freedom to operate process will change from a traditional search to a more involved iterative process going forward. Thank you.
So we already talked about the importance of freedom to operate, which is a very big issue in the industries, because we may develop something which we bring to market and we are not allowed to sell it. So this is a disaster. All the investment is gone. So we have to have processes which ensure our resources to win and to secure our products in the market against threats of third-party IP. And this is the traditional pharma process we see here, FTO process, which I will lose some words upon. Now this is the first steps are all to be seen to just create some question to the system. We have a database or something like that, and we must simplify our questions to this database. Databases need specific search strings, and therefore in the first step we do disassemble the research item, the molecule, into attributes and elements which we can look at, so we have a grip on these topics. And then we go to the regional coverage of the search, which means we diminish the scope of our inquiry. We don't look at countries where there is no issue with our products, and we won't sell them. We select special databases, which may be the databases of the German Patent Office, EPO, WIPO, or SDN, special databases where we can look to structures or attributes and elements of chemical products. To further diminish the amount of documents we may have here, we look at specific classes. So we try to specify according to the international patent classes what we're looking for, and then we go to the definition of keywords and create search strings. So this is related to machine questioning. So we have to set up strings which the machine understands, and we do the search. We will hopefully come to output. This may be 100 documents or 10,000. So, however, we have to go through them and to look what is happening there, who has what. Especially we have to have a two-part view on it, on the claims on the one side and on the disclosure on the other side. So this has different impact on what we on what we have to obey. And as to say, there is often a recursion in these steps. So if we are too high here with 10,000 documents, we have to put our questions more defined, and we go forward again and run the steps, and we look at this here. So this is how we can secure that our products will not be blocked by others when we try to market it. So, thank you.
Now you're actually in the field of digital pharma, which is quite a bit different than what we have seen. In fact, we are not reinventing the wheel, so there will be always the same steps, but we have to take into consideration that, in fact, where it says digitalization, it says augmented complexity, and that makes and mirrors it even in our FTO process, which is much more complex due to the complexity of the matter. So we start again to, let's say, find out what are the characteristics of the object. However, everybody who has done an FTO search knows actually searching, I don't know, the thousands of attributes is almost impossible. So you cannot actually do an exhaustive search on that. So you have to wait actually which attributes and characteristics are quite relevant for you, which without them you cannot do what you want to do. And then that is the first difference we can see here. And once you selected these attributes and elements, which are somehow your key characteristics, which are highly ranked for you, you go to the next step, which is actually the regional coverage of the search. And then you have to know that it's all over. There is no actually structure related database as SDN as we had. We have to take into consideration all available databases, because our competitors are nowadays quite diversified. We have seen there are Googles there are actually IBMs there, and so on and so forth. So all the databases shall be taken into account. We need not only, let's say, the application-oriented classification symbols, but also the functional one, as we are now also in cases where we have to search for same functions in the computer-implemented invention and so on and so forth. The rest is actually classical search. You define your keywords, you create your search strings, you do the search, and you want, of course, come to the evaluation of the results. But, and that is a great but, the evaluation is not that straightforward as we have seen it, as especially in the case of the computer-implemented patents. The clarity of the scope of the protection is not that given as we have been familiar with in the traditional pharma case. So we have, in fact, to match these search results with our structures and live with this uncertainty and unclarity which we have in this case. So that brings us actually to the next point, which is what is the timeline to.
Okay, everyone, last slide for this presentation. On its face, it talks about the timeline of the FTO process. But it also shows something which my colleagues have avoided to say, and let me address the elephant in the room. It's about disruption. The way the digital transformation disrupts business models, it disrupts markets, it disrupts companies, it also disrupts the FTO process. In the old world, it was sufficient to be done with the FTO process at the time of the market launch. We had several steps, and so this slide is a bit oversimplified, but the FTO ended at the time the product went to the market. The FTO analysis could be considered a snapshot, which is sort of a continuing snapshot, but it ended at the market launch. With the new world, the digital transformation, what we have to keep in mind is that the product is not fully defined at the market launch. Some aspects of the product are defined, and we will do, of course, an FTO analysis for whatever we launch in the market. But once we launched one aspect of the product, we're already working at the second aspect, at the new feature of the app, at a new extension of our digital service model. And for that, the FTO has to be ongoing, so that whenever the ongoing development hits the market, we're ready with the FTO. So the FTO will be a continuous process, as will be the underlying development. And that is what this slide is about. Disruption, not only in the market, in the business, in the company, but also in the IP processes, for example, the FTO process. Thank you.